When exposing a cyanotype to UV light, we need to find materials that will block the sunlight, similar to screen printing. Wherever you have opaque materials that are preventing the UV light from hitting the surface, that part of the cyanotype chemistry will wash away. So for instance here, the dots that are open from the cut sheet of paper have turned blue, and where the paper was, that part of the cyanotype washed clean. So when you're working with a photographic image, you need to keep this in mind because what will happen is you'll get a positive and negative reversal. So this image here used a film positive, and what I ended up with was a negative image of the photographic image. So if you want to work with straight photography, make sure you print out a film negative on your transparency before you expose it to the sun. Some examples of materials you can use for your cyanotypes include any sort of natural object. It's a great time, springtime, to go looking for natural objects. You can use cut paper. You can use interesting textiles or textures that you find around the house, like this bag from some onions I bought at the store. You can even use film transparencies that you may have left over from screen printing or print your own. Interesting objects that will cast shadows also work. You can even use your own body. You just need to make sure that you sit still. You can take your time setting up your cyanotype inside, away from the sunlight. I like to place my cyanotype paper that's been stored in a dark room on top of a book, place my objects, and then I have a pane of glass on top to keep everything nice and flat. You can borrow a pane of glass from a picture frame you have around the house. I put tape around mine just so I wouldn't accidentally cut myself. If you don't have a pane of glass, don't worry, you can always just place your objects, but be careful that they don't blow away. Don't be surprised if your cyanotype paper starts to change color. After a certain amount of time, you can actually start to see the exposure happening. Generally, you want to give your cyanotype anywhere from 5 to 25 minutes, depending on the sun conditions. After your exposure, you need to rinse the cyanotype. This will bring out those beautiful blues as well as dissolve any chemicals in your negative area that will wash away. I like to use my bathtub with cold running water. It needs to rinse for about 5 to 10 minutes, and I like to keep the water running for the first couple minutes in order to have more water pass over the surface of the cyanotype. You'll start to see that bluish color. However, that blue will become even more pronounced as your cyanotype dries. I like to have my cyanotypes dry on really a cooking or a baking sheet on top of my sink. This cyanotype was given 15 minutes in partial sunlight and was exposed just a few hours after it dried from coating. This is an example of a cyanotype that's done on canvas. The canvas was coated with the materials and everything was set up just like I did for the paper example. Here I'm going to show you an alternative to using your bathtub if you're worried about making a mess. I set up a plastic tub outside and used my garden hose to fill it up with water. I placed the cyanotype inside of the bucket and agitated with my hand, making sure it had contact with the water. You can even tilt the bucket up and down to further agitate the cyanotype. When using canvas, it actually takes a lot more rinsing because there's a lot more chemicals that you need to coat the surface in order to get an even coating. So keep that in mind. This one I let sit in the bath for maybe 15 to 30 minutes in order to get all of the blues out. Here are a few more examples of my test prints. Overall, I found that on a nice sunny day, about a 10 to 15 minute exposure is perfect. On this print here, I laid down some coins and then a few minutes later added more and then added more and added more. You'll see that some of the circles are much darker than the rest, and that's because they received too much light. Overall, if you're getting prints that are too dark, then they're getting too much UV exposures. On the other hand, if you get a print that's really light, like this one, a lot of the blue has washed away, that means that you don't have enough sunlight and you need to leave it out for either more time or wait for a time of day with more sunshine. And that's it. Have fun with your projects.